1.4b is on dividing decimals. So let's start off by reviewing a multiplication one, and then we'll jump into dividing. So we'll do number 1, 0.85 times 0.8. Well, remember when we're multiplying, we just forget about the decimals to start off with, and we multiply the numbers like we would with any whole numbers. So we want to take 85 times 8. Well, 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 8 is 64, plus 4 would be 68. So now that we've multiplied, we're going to look at our decimal places, and we've got 2 to the right here and 1 to the right here, which is 3 altogether. So we want to have 1, 2, 3 numbers to the right of our decimal point. So our answer is 0.680, which we could also write as 0.68. So that's how we multiply. So for division, before we get going, let's talk about some vocabulary. If we wanted to take 10.2 and divide it by 3.5, the dividend, okay, 10.2 would be our dividend. Whatever we're dividing by is called our divisor. And then the answer to a division problem is a quotient. So if you're dividend, divisor, or quotient, this is what we're referring to. This is what they mean. So example 2, when we divide decimals, we want the divisor to be a whole number, not a decimal. So if you look right now in that example 1, our divisor was a decimal. So we're saying that we want that to be a whole number. So for example, instead of 3.4, we want to somehow make it into 34. So the decimal isn't there. We can make the divisor a whole number by moving the decimal. If you move the decimal in the divisor, you must also move the decimal in the dividend by the same amount. So don't forget to change numbers by the same amount. Let's just practice a couple of times moving this decimal. So we have 3.4. So we want to move the decimal place 1 point to make that 34, which means we have to move this decimal place 1 point. So now we're taking 102 and dividing it by 34. Let's try this again. 0.25, okay, and 15. So we need to move the decimal on the divisor 2 spots, which means right now we have 15, okay, and the decimal's after 15. So we want to move that 2 spots to the right. Notice there aren't any numbers there, so we're going to fill in with zeros. So now it becomes 1,500 divided by 25. Let's try one more. We want to take 0.104 and divide it by 0.02. So we need to move the decimal place on the divisor 2 places to the right. So then we're going to take our decimal point and move it 2 places to the right. So now our problem becomes 10.4 divided by 2. Okay, so once the divisor is a whole number, it's easier to divide. So once we have that whole number, we can just use the traditional method of division to finish the problem. So let's practice. We have 7.5 divided by 0.3. So if we set our problem up, we've got our dividend 7.5 and our divisor 0.3. Well, 0.3 is a decimal, so we have to move that decimal place over 1 spot, which means we have to move the decimal place on 7.5 1 spot to the right. So now it becomes 75 divided by 3. Okay, well now these are whole numbers. It's going to be easier to divide. So let's see, 3 goes into 7 3 times, no it does not, 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6, and then 7 minus 6 is 1. So then we bring down our 5. 3 goes into 15 5 times. 3 times 5 is exactly 15. 15 minus 15 is 0. That's how we know we're done, because we don't have a remainder anymore. So we see that 7.5 divided by 0.3 is 25. Let's keep going here. One more example. If we wanted to take 1.42 and divide it by 0.05. So here, they already did our work for us, and they did not. These numbers do not match up. Okay, so this is just an extra example. Remember in multiplication, we counted the decimal places and then we moved them where it needed to be? Division is different. For division, you just move the decimal straight up, and that gives you your final answer. Okay, so up here, right, our decimal point was technically after the 75, so we would just move that straight up in order to get our answer. So off to the side here, let's try dividing 1.42 and 0.5. So I'm going to move my decimal place over once, So this would give us 14.2 divided by 5. So now here's what we're saying. We're saying our decimal place is right here between our 4 and our 2. So we're going to bring that straight up. Okay. So now we can divide. 5 does not go into 1, so we have a 0 in our tens place. So now we're going to look at 14. Does 5 go into 14? Yes, it does. It goes into there twice. So 5 times 2 would be 10. Now we can subtract. 14 minus 10 is 4. Bring down the 2. So now we're looking at 42. 5 goes into 42 8 times, because 5 times 8 is 40. Notice how our decimal places line up. So we brought the 2 down, so that was looking at the 10th place. So then our 8 went in the 10th place. So everything should line up like this. Alright, so 42 minus 40 is 2. Now we're going to add a 0 and bring it down. So now we're looking at 20. 5 goes into 20 4 times. And that's exactly, so when we end with a 0, right, we don't have a remainder left anymore. That's how we know we're done. So our answer is 2.84. 2.84. So again, we don't have to move the, we don't have to figure anything out with the decimal point. We just carry it straight up from wherever it was in our problem, and that's where it should go. So that's the big difference between multiplying and dividing. In both of them, you just use the traditional multiplication division you would with whole numbers. But when you're multiplying, you have to add up those decimal places and figure out where the decimal goes. But division, you don't have to do that. You just carry it up. So you have to make sure you're lining things up very carefully when you're dividing. All right, let's do a couple of real-world examples here. We want to apply this. Your mom sent you to the store with $30 to buy Halloween candy. Each bag of candy costs $6.99. How many bags of candy can you buy? All right, well, we want to figure out what 30 divided by 6.99 is. So, let's see. We need to move our decimal place over 2 spots. 2 spots. So this is really going to be 3,000 divided by 699. Okay, 699. This is a big number. All right, we're going to have to do some extra thinking here. So let's see. So 699 does not go into 300, so we actually need to think about how many times it goes into 3,000. All right, well, let's see, 699 plus 699 would be 18, that'd be 19, that'd be 13, 1,398. I think we could double that and still be less than 3,000. That would be 8 plus 8 is 16, 19, 7, 2. So let's see, we're looking at 2,700 and 3,000. If we added 699 again, it would go over 3,000. So 699 goes into 3,000 4 times, and it gives us 2,796. And now we can subtract. So we're going to have to borrow. Okay, so this would become a 9, and a 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 9 is 0. 9 minus 7 is 2. Okay, so then we're left with 2004. Now 699 does not go into this, but notice that, right, if we kept going, it would be after our decimal point. So we would be getting something like 4.3. Can you buy 4.3 bags of candy? Like, you're gonna go to the store and they're gonna let you buy a third of a bag of candy? Probably not, right? So since we have to buy a whole bag of candy, all or nothing, we don't need to keep going with our decimal point. So we know that we could buy 4 bags of candy with our $30, and we'd have a little bit of money left over, but we could only buy 4 bags of candy. Okay, number 2, Costco sells lots of items in bulk. Recently you bought a box of 35 granola bars for $12.25. How much did you pay per granola bar? Okay, so if all of them together cost $12.25, we want to figure out each individual one, so we have to take $12.25 and divide it by 35. Well, notice that 35 is already a whole number, so we don't have to move any decimal places. We can just start dividing. 25, not 35. Alright, so I'm going to bring my decimal place up so it's in the right spot here. So let's see, 35 doesn't go into 12, so we need to think about how many times does 35 go into 122. Well, 35 times 2 would be 70, plus another 35 would be 105, plus another 35 would be 140, so that would be too big. So 35 goes into 122 3 times. That'd be 105, and now we can subtract. We have to borrow, so this becomes a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. 1 minus 0 is 1. And now we can bring down the 5. So now we're thinking about how many times does 35 go into 175. Alright, well, we said 105 plus 35 is 140, plus 35 would be 175 exactly. Look at that. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times. And then since it went in exactly, we don't have a remainder, so just 0.35. So remember, we wanted to figure out how much did you pay per granola bar. Well, each granola bar cost 35 cents. 35 cents for each granola bar. Okay, one more. I traveled 245 miles in 3.5 hours. How fast was I driving? Okay, so we want to figure out how many miles did we go each hour. So we are going to divide. Alright, so 3.5 has a decimal place. We have to move that 1 place to the right. So that would give us 35 and 2,450. And our decimal place would go after the 0. So 35 does not go into 24, but 35 does go into 245. We have to think about how many times. So let's see. We know we'll keep going with our calculation over on the side. If we add 35 again, that would be 210 plus 35 would be 245 exactly. Look at that. So if this was 5, we had 2 more, so that would be 7. 35 times 7 is 245. So we can subtract that and bring the 0 down. Well, 35 does not go in to 0, so it goes in there 0 times. All right. So it's just going to keep repeating this 0 pattern if we keep going. So 70.0, we could also write a 70. So if you travel 245 miles in 3.5 hours, you are driving 70 miles per hour. So big things to remember about division. You can only divide by a whole number. Right? So anytime you have a decimal, you're just going to move the decimal place over on your dividend and your divisor, and then you can divide with long division.